Welcome to Golf Training Hacks and part 3 in our series on why leg is so important. Now, if you're having trouble making consistent impact, a lot of that can be traced back to leg, and not only creating leg, but timing leg and sequencing leg correctly. It's so important that you get control of the club face at impact, and that has a lot to do with leg, and here's why. It's really just physics. When the force is ahead of the mass, you have more control over the force. When the force is behind the mass, you have less control. And here's a great example. Let's take a child's wagon, the wagon with 4 wheels, a hinge, and a handle. If that wagon is in front of you, and here's the handle, and I'm walking with the wagon, it's hard to control it. And the faster I walk, and if I run, it's really hard to control, and it's probably going to turn back on you. So me, the force, is pushing the mass, it's behind the mass. But when I put the wagon behind me and pull it, I can run as fast as I want, and the force, me, is ahead of the mass, so it's much more easy to control. That's the golf swing, and that's leg. When your hands are behind the club face at impact, it's hard to control the club face. When your hands are ahead of the club face at impact, the force being your hands, and the mass being, let's say at this point, the club face or the club head, it's easier to control the club face. That's essentially leg. But it has to be timed correctly. Your hands and your hips have to time that sequencing of leg correctly, or else you're going to lose that control. And here's what I mean. If your hands catch up, if you've created leg, let's say you've created a nice amount of leg coming into your downswing, but your hands catch up to your hips, so as I'm coming through impact, my hips, even if it's for a split second impact, they stop here and they square the ball. It's more than likely that you're going to be flipping at impact, and that's going to put your hands behind the club face. Similarly, back to that point, if your hands catch up at impact, but then you work your hips through impact, well, at impact you've still flipped the ball, even though you are rotating through impact. But suppose you don't even rotate through impact. Suppose once you come to impact, you just square and you stay here and you have that handsy, wristy movement, well, then you're probably going to be actually casting the club, and then certainly you're going to be flipping. That means that at impact, your hands, the force, is behind the club face. Whereas at impact, it should look more like this, where your hands are ahead of the club face at impact, and that's going to give you more control. Now, of course, you'll have more of this angle with an iron than you would with a driver, just because of the length of it. But as you're sequencing leg, regardless of the club that you're using, you need to have those hands in front of the club face. That's going to give you some more control. That means your hips have to be strong and mobile, because, as I've said many times, the hips lead the way in the golf swing. So in the next video, we're going to work on hip rotation, and I'm going to share with you a video from our On the Range series, hip rotation training course from golftraininghacks.com. So let's get started. In this video, I'll demonstrate an address position pulley rotational row. Now, it's important to get some functional mobility into our hips. So a good way to do that is to mimic, to an extent, what happens in the golf swing. So let's mimic what we're going to do on our backswing and at impact and through release. So on your backswing, you're going to drive your foot forcefully into the ground, putting pressure on the inside of your foot, and you're going to extend your hip backwards. So this hip is going backwards on your backswing, and you're not swaying over your rear foot. Now, as you come through impact and release, you're driving forcefully into the front side, and then this hip is going backwards as well, and you're creating that line with your ankle, knee, hip, and shoulder being in one line as you come through your address position. So as you come through impact and release, this hip and leg is extending forcefully into the ground, and your hip is going backwards. So let's use a pulley system to mimic that rotation in your hips. So to do this exercise, you're going to need some kind of pulley system. Something like I have hooked up onto a door. You can use pulleys and hook it onto a door frame, or at the gym you'll have plenty of access to these type of machines. Now you want to use the pulley system from the bottom. So you want it to be going from the bottom up to you. So what you're going to do is grab with two hands, set your address position. You're going to hip hinge back, get that spine angle leaning a little forward. You're going to draw the bands into your hips, and then you're going to extend into your backswing. Draw the band into your hips, extend into impact. And do this for reps. So that's a nice way to get some functional mobility into your hips as we mimic, to some extent, what's happening in the golf swing. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. And if you'd like to learn more about golf training hacks, our courses, and our online coaching programs, check out golftraininghacks.com.